The badger cull in Somerset is likely to be extended by up to 3 weeks because too few animals have been killed.
The government department responsible, DEFRA, says it's considering an application for an extension from the company conducting the pilot. It insists it's been effective, but says more time is needed to complete the job.
The Somerset cull began amid tight security 6 weeks ago, with the aim of killing some 1,650 badgers over the cull period. DEFRA sources now say that just over half that figure have been shot, well below the target. But they also say that the number of badgers in the area when the cull started was significantly less than previously thought. Originally, they calculated almost 2,500 badgers in the area, but now they believe there was only 1,500, meaning about 60% were killed, close to the original target. Protesters who bitterly oppose the badger culls in both Somerset and Gloucestershire will today learn that the company running the cull has applied to Natural England to resume culling in Somerset for a further 2 or 3 weeks to, in their terms, get the job done. Opponents of the cull are certain to accuse organisers of shifting the goalposts, and they warn that an incomplete cull could actually accelerate the spread of bovine TB. So-called badger patrols will continue in Somerset and in Gloucestershire, where a similar pilot cull has less than a week to run. It remains perhaps the most polarising issue in the British countryside, with farmers and ministers still insisting that killing badgers is an essential way to save cattle from the spread of bovine TB. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Somerset.
Well, let's talk to Jeremy now, who's in the cull zone in West Somerset for us this morning. Good morning to you, Jeremy. Will people be saying that this is evidence it has been a failure?
I think, Susanna, each side will look at these results and interpret them as you'd expect in very different ways. For those who stand against this cull, I think this will be evidence of what they've said all along, that the science on this is too shaky, that they will say that the government can't even get their figures right of the number of badgers which were on the ground initially and consequently the number that needed to be killed. They will also say that if these high numbers, about 70% of badgers, are not removed from the landscape, then again the science they will suggest shows that the badgers may flee across the countryside and accelerate actually the spread of bovine TB. On the other hand, of course, the government and farmers will say, look, they're very close to this 70% figure, just a couple more weeks and they will be there. And they say this is absolutely crucial, that the science is robust, and it's the only way to stop the spread of bovine TB, along with the other measures that the government is taking. Susanna.
All right, Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. In just over half an hour's time, we're going to be speaking to the National Farmers Union about why they think the cull is successful. And the badger cull being piloted in Somerset is likely to be extended now by up to 3 weeks. DEFRA, the government department responsible, says it's considering a request for more time from the company which is conducting the pilot.
New figures show the number of badgers shot during the 6-week trial is around half the original target. DEFRA says it has been effective, but protesters warn that incomplete cull could actually accelerate the spread of bovine TB. President of the National Farmers Union, Peter Kendall, joins us from our London studio now. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Kendall. Could you just go through the numbers for us? Do you have those?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, the initial estimates in Somerset were there were 2,000 badgers needed to be removed to show it was effective and would reduce the disease. But look, you know, these are wild animals. They're out in the natural environment. And the government, the scientists, did an assessment of numbers as late in the time period as they possibly could, just before the cull started. And I think a lot of anecdotal evidence from the farmers were that they believed this had been a really difficult breeding season. The level of disease in badgers was higher than had been anticipated. And what the results were was that there was actually a lot less badgers in the Somerset area than had been previously thought. Now, what we must do is we must make sure we don't wipe out the badgers. So when the revised estimate came down, the number we need to take out, or the farmers, the contractors on the ground need to take out, has been reduced. We want more time to make sure that what we do is as effective as possible to reducing this ghastly disease.
How many badgers have been killed so far?
About 850 have been killed in Somerset, and we're hoping that through a few more weeks we can make sure that we go from what is around 60% now, bearing in mind we needed to get 70% of the badgers, we can go from being around 60 to nearer 70% or maybe above 70%, so that we meet the best criteria that the scientists have set. Why? Because last year 38,000 cattle were killed, and we've got to do something about this spread of this ghastly disease.
Well, something clearly is going wrong here, because your original estimates, I know the numbers were higher, but then you'd had a certain amount of time you thought you could do that. Now you've said the numbers actually out there are lower, so you've got to kill fewer badgers. So how come that hasn't been done yet? Is something going wrong with the cull itself, with the process, with the shooting that happens at night?
Let's be really honest about it. These are pilots. We're learning as we go. From when we first started, or the contractor started 6 weeks ago, with every single night or every single week, we found different ways of shooting and controlling these badgers in the wild. So what we've done is, I think, been really responsible. We know there's been some protester activity, and as soon as any person has been spotted in a vicinity, shooting has stopped.
So
safety,
hold on, can we be clear about this? Are you saying that protesters have stopped you achieving those targets? Is that what's happened?
No, what I'm saying is that the criteria for these pilots were safety, humaneness and effectiveness. And the safety has come first in every single event. And therefore, we've been cautious about how we've delivered these pilot culls. We want 3 more weeks to make sure that we get enough to really bear down on this ghastly disease.
The problem you have is that, on the face of it, from what you said, from the protesters' point of view, those people who are unconvinced by it, they will think, number one, that the figures were wrong. Number two, you don't seem to have known in advance quite how you were going to proceed in terms of the shooting process and what would happen in practice. And number three, now you've just asked for more time about what is quite a controversial process anyway. It looks like it wasn't very well thought through.
Oh no, look, what we are doing is making sure we respond to the science and the estimations of numbers as we learn them. And this is not a scientific experiment taking place in some lab in some town somewhere. This is happening in the countryside with animals that vary. Their populations vary from year to year. And we have to respond accordingly. And what is absolutely paramount is we follow the best scientific advice. The Chief Veterinary Officer has said quite clearly he believes the 60% that have been already removed in Somerset will make a positive difference. We want to make sure we get nearer the 70%, because that will have an even bigger impact on the disease spread in that area. But also at the same time, we mustn't remove all of the badgers. So you can see the really delicate balancing act to try and make sure we bear down on TB in cattle.
Peter Kendall, Chair of the National Farmers Union, thank you for your time this morning.
Just after 8 o'clock here on Breakfast, we'll be speaking to Brian May, former Queen guitarist who is campaigning against the badger cull. Well, let's go over to the cull zone in West Somerset this morning. Jeremy Cook is there for us. Jeremy, what does this say about the success or failure of the cull? And do we know yet how many of those badgers which have been culled are TB carriers?
Well, just taking that last question first, no, we don't know, and the government has always said that it was not going to be looking at the bodies of the badgers and testing them, simply because they say it's not really the question is how many badgers have got the disease now, but the reservoir they create. They know that the disease circulates. That's part of the argument here. But whether it's been a success or failure, well, ask each side and they will give you a very different view of events. Of course, those who are against the cull say this is further evidence that the science is just not reliable, that the government can't even get the numbers right in terms of the numbers of badgers on the ground and consequently the numbers that need to be killed. There are warnings from them that not clearing the landscape to a sufficient degree can even mean you can accelerate the spread of bovine TB as badgers move through the countryside as their social groups are disrupted by the cull. But if you ask the government, if you ask the National Farmers Union, they will say that they're very close to the 70% that they need to make this mission accomplished in their terms. They're asking for 2 or 3 more weeks to get that job done.
Jeremy, thanks very much indeed. We'll be speaking to the former Queen guitarist Brian May, campaigning against the cull in a few minutes' time here on Breakfast. Now, the company, which has been carrying out a pilot badger cull in Somerset, has asked for more time to get the job done.
The 6-week project should have finished early this week, but organisers want to keep shooting for up to 3 weeks more after failing to kill enough badgers. Well, the Queen guitarist Brian May is campaigning against the cull. He's in our central London studio this morning. Very good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning. We've heard the revised figures for the numbers they think were there in the first place, and we know now they want to extend the cull. What do you think?
To be honest, it's getting more and more ridiculous. You know, this is the third lot of figures we've seen. They're wildly disparate. They have no idea how many badges there are, and they keep adjusting the figures to make it look like this is a success. You know, I mean, Peter Kendall denying that this is a failure is becoming ludicrous. And, you know, they were warned by the scientists. You shouldn't be listening to me or Peter Kendall. You should be listening to the scientists who have said culling badgers in this way will spread TB. This is not helping the farmers. We should be vaccinating.
Yeah, so when we spoke to Peter Kendall earlier on, he mentioned a number of factors. The fact that this is effectively something that hasn't been done before on this kind of scale. He mentioned the fact that there were some safety issues, that it was taking longer because there were protesters and there were concerns about safety as they were trying to carry out their work. What do you know about that?
This was supposed to be a 2-week shoot. You know, the RBCT recommended if you shoot for any longer than 2 weeks, you're in grave danger of perturbation, which spreads the disease to neighbouring farms. It's already been extended to 6 weeks from 2. Now they want another 3 weeks. This has demonstrated already that free shooting doesn't work. The only way they got to 800 badgers was by cage trapping and shooting. Now, if you're cage trapping and shooting, you can cage trap and vaccinate, and that's what we should be doing, because vaccination will lead to the eradication of TB. There is no way on earth that culling badgers can lead to the eradication of TB.
Do you think, I mean, it's interesting looking at some of the people who've been in touch with our programme this morning. It's an emotive issue because we're talking about wildlife and people, you know, worry about it from that point of view. Is there a danger that the argument becomes an emotive one, if you like, and the idea of a cull and the shooting is something that people find distasteful, so they say it's not a good idea? Do those things get mixed up, do you think?
I think there is emotion on both sides, but the plain facts are we need a solution which is favourable to our wildlife and to the farmers, and this is not it. We have to abandon this ridiculous cull. It has to be stopped now. There has to be a re-evaluation, and the government should be prioritising vaccination of cattle. They're still not doing it. They were given a 10-year plan by Borg in Brussels. They're still not taking the first step, which is to do field trials of the vaccination of cows. This is what we need to be doing. The cull is a waste of time, and it's a waste of our money.
Brian May, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.